Dystopia warning, obviously. Now, if you're giving your brain a well-deserved rest after the last 14 years of abject chaos, you might not be aware that there's a leadership contest afoot in the Conservative Party. Now, I understand that most people want to, just neck a bottle of Valium, have a little rest, but it's incredibly important that we keep an eye on them, because the moment your back's turned, they'll either rob you, try to get the entire country to turn against your particular demographic in a culture war, or touch you up. Other Tory crimes are available. So these are the contenders in the running to replace the largely absent Rishi Sunak. He was missing for 8 weeks, but he is quite easy to lose because he's tiny. Now this has been rumbling on for a little while now. So we're now in this position. These are the final 4 contenders to lead what is now only one of the most evil political parties in Britain. Now these are the finalists, but there were a few other contenders. Other people vying to be leader of the Conservative Party were Cthulhu. He had to drop out for a few reasons. 1, people could go insane just by looking at him, and he was surplus to requirements in the Tory voter base because they're all mental. And 2, he found the Conservative Party to be too extreme, and he's a mythical sea beast. Another person that dropped out, the Pied Piper of Hamelin. The Tories were concerned that the children that he lured would not just be the poor ones. And as a German, there were concerns that he was too pro-European. He had expressed desires to return to the single market. Another contender, Rose West. But like many EDL nonces, she decided to join Reform instead because she felt that they represented her views better. Then there was that bloody hippie, Suella Braverman, but she turned out to be about as popular as a pedo in a toy shop. And finally, the final contender for the Tory leadership that never quite made it, your mum! Yeah, she had to pull out because she was too busy shagging Boris Johnson. Don't feel bad about it, he'll get us all eventually. He's like the film Taken. In the sense that he will find you and he will fuck you, one way or another. So the motley crew of Tories that remain, Tugendhat, Jenrick, Bad Enoch and Cleverly, most of the public won't have a clue who any of them are. But their constituencies are areas that I would avoid, because the constituencies must have a vast proportion of people with an average IQ of 7, if after the last 14 years they willingly voted in a Tory. So why is this important? Well, as I said, you can't take your eyes off them. Who they decide to be their next leader will show us what kind of opposition the new Labour government's going to be dealing with. Spoiler alert, they're going to be dealing with a mental opposition, regardless of which wins the contest. Firstly, I'll run through the ones that haven't got a shot of winning, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about the one that has, and why he is a terrifying danger to humanity, much like all Tories. It's going to be Bad Enoch, of course, otherwise known as Bad Enoch, part-time hacker, who admitted to having hacked into Harriet Harman's website years ago, and a woman who spent most of her campaign video talking about how she's not afraid of Doctor Who. I mean, A, that's a lie, because everyone's scared of those scary, angels that cover their eyes. But this bizarre remark dates back to David Tennant, who echoed the thoughts of most of the country when he said that she should just shut up. A remark that he said in defence of the LGBT community, a community that she weaponised in her culture wars. Behind the scenes, there's apparently sabotage of her campaign, which is hardly surprising because the Tories aren't exactly the most progressive bunch, are they? Another contender is James Cleverly. At the time, his remarks about medicating his own wife into unconsciousness didn't receive broad outcry, but in the wake of the Giselle Pellicott case, you can see just how dangerous that kind of remark is, can't you? He's seen as someone that's more centrist, which is remarkable. And he's another one of those Tories at the moment who seems to be pulling the whole last 14 years didn't happen ploy, shamelessly denying his role in destroying Britain. Tories are going to Tory. Then, of course, we have Tom Tugendhat, a man that resembles like an evil Eddie from Bottom. He's seen as a more centrist politician as well. He's one of the Tories that seems normal. He's the one that a lot of people were saying, oh, well, I thought he was one of the good ones. But people need to realise there's no such thing as a good Tory. They all close ranks for personal gain. Every single time. I've not got an enormous amount of dirt on him. If he was a colour, he'd be beige. However, he appears to be going down the same mad loop as the rest of them regarding the European Convention on Human Rights, which is essentially to the right the new Brexit. And look at how well that turned out. But like many of the others, he's pivoting with the insane direction that the party's going in, which leads me neatly on to the front runner. And the worst of all of them, Robert fucking Jenrick. Jenrick snuck up on us, didn't he? Probably because it's extremely difficult to see a man that resembles a giant baby in a Debenhams suit as evil. Kind of hard to take that seriously, isn't it? He's a front runner and he's as dodgy as hell. Now, most people remember him as the immigration minister, one of about 10,000 that they had in that year. Ordered officials to paint over murals at a children's asylum processing centre to stop them from feeling welcome. Well, not much has improved since, to put it mildly. Maybe we should call him Robert Jenrick, on account of him just being a standard issue, Sloaney, David Cameron, One Nation, supposedly progressive, conservative. Well, he's being bankrolled by the super rich. I did a video a little while back about an Israeli billionaire and hedge funders in Australia donating to him, but being careful to hide their identities in the process. He's been involved in a number of controversies, otherwise known as crimes. In 2021, he poured £1 billion of our money into key Conservative marginals that were won in 2019. Money that was supposed to be used for levelling up, but went to comparatively wealthy Conservative constituencies in an attempt to try and keep hold of them. There's a shit list as long as War and Peace on this arse clown. One of the biggest controversies that he was involved in was in 2020, and it related to Tory donor and former newspaper magnate Richard Desmond. You see, Richard Desmond wanted to build a number of flats, a development that would have cost £1 billion, but he wanted to avoid a levy, which would have come into force and forced Desmond to pay £45 million to the local council, which they would have spent on infrastructure for the residents, because that's how fucking taxes work. Jenrick helped him, didn't he? Trying to avoid that levy. The council contested it, obviously, and he was forced to admit that he'd shown bias, because it also came to light that he'd sat at a fundraiser next to Desmond and seen a video of the development plans. And he'd also texted with Desmond to complete the process before the levy came into force. And 2 weeks after he was given the green light, he donated £12,000 to the Tory party, because this is how it works. Then there's the fact that during lockdown, Jenrick was pogoing around his many houses like the monopoly man. He owns 2 properties in London and a grade 1 listed manor in Herefordshire, of course. Really hard to figure out why he's a Tory, isn't it? That wants to run for leader. He's essentially an anti-Muslim, anti-immigration nut who thought that Sunak went too soft on Rwanda, and he's in the pro-Braverman mad camp. Now, why has he changed from a middle-of-the-road Tory to an ultra-fash? Money, I would say, and a relentless pursuit of power at any cost. Precisely not the person that you want to ever let us leave the ECHR, which is our only protection against the state. Now, he's not thick or mindless, he's actually very clever and very calculated. But I'd say he has no morals, just a ruthless desire for power. I think he's seen the direction that reform and the former Conservative Party were going in, and he thinks just doubling down and going even more crazy hard right is the way forward. And it's very difficult to tell whether or not that's going to be a vote winner. With the state of our press and broadcasters, the absolute decline of the country, and alarmingly people not getting their news from proper sources. He's also sympathetic to Nigel Farage and reform, probably because he's seen how much money this approach has made Farage. If he's aligned with that lot, you've got to look out for foreign interference. So that's the Farage, Reform, Leave, and now Tory modus operandi. Watch him carefully.